Hello, everybody. This is Dale from the Transatlantic Wrestling Talk Show. And today, I just kind of wanted to touch base because Andy and I were supposed to record on Sunday. We had some technical issues, but we will be going back to that. So, we're going to be doing a format where we have a recorded version and then we're going to do some editing and then go back into just um, just a way for us to kind of familiarize ourselves with recording itself, and just make sure we could get some more types of cool technology to use. But I wanted to make this video because I think there's something that is really, like I said, long overdue, and that would actually be just who we are. I know there's a lot of people that just sit there and they come out with these videos that just judge wrestling and then go over reviews of pay-per-views, shows, TV shows, and that's a great format for them. And I get that, because people like takes, people like hot takes, people like to hear other personalities. I mean, Twitch is one of the biggest draws as far as monetary reason, monetarily, for people. So I really do think that that is a market that has its own niche. And if you look at it right now, I mean, you have people like G4 that just went under, because of just political reasons and their beliefs and, kind of getting woke and going broke. That's another story. But their main audience were the people that like to Twitch, and the ones that like to live stream and broadcast. And I think part of it is that when I looked at that platform of Twitch, I said to myself, okay, what are they doing? Why are these people and these personalities coming to the forefront and becoming these very polarizing figures that make squillions of dollars? It's because we know who they are. We identify with them. We listen to them. We say, hey, they like this. We see them watch this. We see them play this. That's why we have an attraction to them. Not just obviously some people are very good looking and attracted to them. But overall, though, we have a basis of who they are. Now, Andy and I make sure that we at least put ourselves out there on the forefront. We ask personalized questions about where we were at certain times and how we got into certain parts of wrestling and, kind of our overall feeling of people. So if we like something, we say why we like it. If we don't like it, we tell you why we don't like it, but we keep it as a casual conversation to ourselves. And I think that that is kind of where, a lot of people kind of neglect that for their audience. Let me explain. When you hear people say, oh, I don't like, the way this guy entered into the match or how he went into a match, they just talk about how they don't like that person, which is fine. But give us reasons why that you don't like that person going into there. Does it make sense for a storyline? Does it make sense as far as, I guess, a build for somebody? Or maybe perhaps you feel that it's better suited somewhere else. You're not getting that from a lot of people that actually talk about these wrestling shows. So Andy and I definitely pride ourselves on actually at least going in depth as far as what we could do and what we talk about and why we think this could be better suited. And we also, about a year ago, we tried to tackle the market as far as, um, not just these reviews of the daily shows, but also, or the weekly shows, whatever. But we kind of then sprinkled into how would you book it this year and blah, blah, blah. And it was a cool format because we kind of looked at wrestling as a spectrum. Now, part of that is now reflecting on why we got into the business. And I think that's something that we really never ventured into. We never had a discussion. We never talked about it. I think, if anything, we kind of discussed, what we liked about wrestling, but we never really said what got us into it. And I think that that's long overdue here. And I would love to actually just take a couple minutes to talk to you about that. But first, what do people say? Stay hydrated. Anyway, um, I got into wrestling, I guess, in like 1991, 92. I remember watching Hulk Hogan. I was 6 years old and 6 or 7 years old. And I remember seeing Hulk Hogan and always thought he was larger than life. My dad knew him as a guy that mentored Mr. T in WrestleMania, in WrestleMania. And That's the extent of it. So that means that there's not much extent because that's really not entirely true. But I remember just seeing him and just knowing that this is the big match feel. Let's take everything away as far as what we know about him now. The greatest politician in sports entertainment. But I knew that if he was in a match, it was a big deal. And you would kind of, I didn't really get all the pay-per-views that then. But I remember seeing somebody, and I didn't know that wrestling was predetermined. I'll never say it's fake, it's predetermined. The outcomes are predetermined. But to me, I believed in it, and I always wanted that good guy. I never was really an Ultimate Warrior fan. Even in this day, I think that he really ruined a lot of things in the business. But I remember seeing Hogan. I loved it. I was a big Hogan fan at that point. I was also There was also a side of me as the years went on. I appreciated Bret Hart, but now I have a full-fledged appreciation for watching him in matches, and it's just, to me, fantastic. Um, I actually was a big fan, even when he was a heel, of Shawn Michaels. Nobody moved like him. Nobody moved around and was able to sell and bump and hit the turnbuckle and flip himself over just to show how much force that person had behind each launch. Um, I knew there was something about him. I didn't think he would get to the magnitude where he was at, with the WrestleMania victories and the screw job and everything like that. Um, so those are who I liked. Why I like them is a totally different thing. And I'm kind of gonna bear all right now. Wrestling was an outlet for me. Wrestling was something that was always around. Um, I remember I'd be home and my brother wasn't kind of new. So he was born in 1991. I love him to death, and him and I both watch wrestling too. I remember actually, watching it, wanting to be these guys that are larger than life. Because they were. They weren't I didn't look at them as athletes. I looked at them as gods because they were on the microphones. This is before social media too. These are the ones that spoke out loud and just carried themselves in a different way. And actually, if everybody realizes 80s and 90s, people screamed at the microphones. Look at any LOD promo. Um, but these guys weren't just wrestlers to me. These were people that were on another level as far as human beings go. Um, and I felt like they were there for me. Um, I had dealt with some issues, I guess you could say, with my family at some point, and I remember just actually, you know, I've had some issues with my mother, and I or not really that. I think that it's more or less like it was filling a void because she was there, but she wasn't. She was going through substance problems and whatever, and my father was always there. And he just wanted to always keep peace and everything, and I just feel like this was such an outlet to me. Wrestling was an outlet for me. I And it was just something that was always in the background. Even when things were rough, I'd be able to turn on Raw and submerge myself into something that would take me to a different area in my mind. And also, just there, I could focus on that. Whatever was behind me was behind me. I could deal with those problems in another way. But I let my imagination run while watching wrestling. And at that point, that's when I realized, like, this is okay. Like, this is good therapy for me. And as years went by, you would kind of like, up until about 95, 96, you were kind of embarrassed to tell people that you were a wrestling fan. At least I was. You know, Remember, I'm from Long Island. And I think that people don't realize that it's not like stuff from Mid South Coliseum. It's not stuff from down south where this was a regular thing every weekend. You didn't really have too much of that. So, instead I was kind of under the radar fan. Then I found out more friends of mine were under the radar fans too. And we would end up discussing and talking about it, you know, and it was kind of cool. You go to these wrestling pay-per-views. It was something you really look forward to. I remember every January, I looked forward to having 7, 8 people watching this pay-per-view. that my friends' parents would actually splurge on, splurge $30, um, just end up getting. So, and we'd have a party for that. It was a highlight. I wasn't too much into regular sports at that point, but it was a highlight for me. I enjoyed it. I ended up getting into football later on, but not too much later. But um, as far as wrestling goes, it was always an outlet. My father would get me tickets to go see events. He'd bring me there. I'd say probably the second event he ever brought us to. Not even kidding. It was ECW at Freeport Rec Center, and that's a little town not too far from me, on Long Island. And I remember the Dudley Boys cursing in the middle of the ring, and my brother was with them. And my brother was got to be 7 or 8, and he would always go, "Dad, what is he saying?" If you knew anything about the Dudley Boys promos that they would cut on the crowd, they didn't hold back, and there was a lot of foul mouth language there. And my dad would always go to him, "I don't know, I can't hear him." So that was one very funny thing going on. Overall, though, my dad embraced that, and that was awesome to me. My mother, she would come around to get sober and stuff. It would help because she knew I was a big fan. And, they were very supportive of it. They wouldn't say, "Oh, this stuff is so stupid." They supported it. Even with those good times, you'd have bad times too. And guess what was always there? Wrestling. I disclosed to my wife not too long ago that, do you know why I watch this? As Andy and I prepped for a pay per view that we had to review. I say, this is the one outlet I have that is surreal, but this really means something because it takes me away from everything else in the world. There's problems in there, but there's good guys and bad guys dealing with it. That's why I think it's impossible to not have heels and faces, because you're dictating a story and you're also helping out other people too that might need that outlet, that might need to pay attention to that, because that's the only good story that they have in their life. And that's what I think wrestling is. It doesn't matter the company, it doesn't matter who you watch. You need a story. Those stories contribute to somebody else's life. I believe in it. The story inside the ring, whether it's selling an arm or championing somebody else or having a underdog feel with a match, a David and Goliath, even if the outcome isn't what the original David and Goliath was, that 12 minutes telling that story helps somebody get through their day. Wrestling did that for me, and wrestling always has done that for me. Um, Now, I want to go back to what I was saying before about how there was an underground following with other fans. One of the key moments was definitely the Attitude Era. You knew something was going on. You knew that this was bigger than wrestling in itself because you realized that other people heard about people, whether it's a crotch chop, whether it's a middle finger, whether it's a sock puppet, whether it's an eyebrow. When the outside world knows who they are and can identify with them, that's how you know you've crossed into a whole different parallel universe, or a whole different universe, I guess you could say. It helped. It helped me with conversations. At that point, I was still a teenager, but I remember people asking, "Oh yeah, tell me more about that Rock guy," or "That's Steve Austin. He's something, huh? He's something different to watch." You'd be approached by people that admitted and that probably didn't watch in 15 years. They might have just known him from the Hollywood Blondes, or they didn't even know he was in the Hollywood Blondes. But they would ask about Steve Austin, or they'd ask about Mick Foley, especially me coming from Long Island. He's a mainstay here. Lives over by D. Snyder. So if you want to really date yourself, you can look into that. But that's another successful story too. The point I'm trying to get at is I was attracted to the business before it was a business to me. I think that's how you really understand what you value in life and what's important to you. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up here. That's the introductory to me. I have a beautiful son who's going to be turning 1 tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to that, celebrating that with my wife. Um, Family issues, they tend to come up and go down every once in a while. I just want to put out there to people that whether it's wrestling, whether it's sports, whether it's hobbies, collectible card games, if you're playing board games, be sure to take your time out to spend time to actually enjoy that, because sometimes that's the only outlet and that's the only understanding that people might have, and that's how they cope. And there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you're not harming anybody, or you're not mentally messing up anybody. I think the most important lesson that we know that we take into each other's feelings is that whatever the outlet is, whether good or bad, could be anything. But if that's how you deal with something that, without harming anybody, continue to do it. I'll continue to watch wrestling. I hope that everybody else continues to watch wrestling and enjoy it. That's what I tell people every single time we sign off. When I used to do the sign offs for a certain company here, I would say just keep enjoying wrestling because it's true. That's what we want people to do. It's a big world out there, and there's more companies than ever. Whether they're good or not, that's another story. But if you could take the time out to take your children, take your wife, take your husband, take your significant other, or take anybody to an event, something different. It's time for you to enjoy. Who's going to sit down? Who's going to walk out of a wrestling event and just be upset and miserable by just attending there? You might be upset by outcomes. I will admit to you, not even going to lie. I was at Royal Rumble in 2008, the one where John Cena surprised everybody as number 30. I was pissed. I didn't want him there. He won. Now it's marked off as one of the greatest Royal Rumble moments. To me, in hindsight, I get it. It makes sense to me. Regardless if I agreed with it or not, I'm still a fan. Not going anywhere. I left for a little bit because, like I said on one podcast, I didn't like how WWE was trying to delete names from the history. Guys like Davey Boy Smith being referred to as Bret Hart's nephew years ago. You're trying to discredit a legacy there, and that I was not a fan of. So, yes, there are shenanigans. I have to take the good with the bad, obviously, but just keep enjoying wrestling and keep using it to cope. Certainly is a medicine for me. And to quote John Bon Jovi, your love is like a bad medicine. Sometimes wrestling is a bad medicine, but it works, and it's a hard pill to swallow. All right, guys, that's it for me. This is Dale from the Transatlantic Wrestling Talk Show, and just keep watching wrestling and enjoying.